Welcome to No Nonsense Whiskey. My name's Vin PF, and on today's episode we're going to be doing another little duo. You might have seen on my Whisky in, Whisky out recently, I've got quite a lot of Canmore bottlings coming up, and they're kind of split into two main ranges. You've got the core range, which we have here today. We're going to be doing a little verses on those, and then you've got their single cask range, and I'll probably be doing a review on each of those bottles because I think they need to have their own airtime, let's say, but these two really lend themselves to being together. So hopefully after this video you'll have a little bit of an idea about what Canmore is and what they're doing, and a little bit more of an idea about what these two bottles are. As I said, here we have the core range. These are some Charles Edge releases, which is an independent bottler based in the UK. They've got good access to some good casks, as you'll see when I get into my single cask ones. They are also responsible for the Scotch Gold, which I did a video on fairly recently as well, so please do go and check that one out. That's a kind of like a blended core range, let's say, and they've got 4 different bottlings in there, and they're well worth anyone's time. They're quite cheap, so it's good stuff. And here we have single malt releases. Now we don't know the distillery, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Sort of, there's some clues, and I'll let you guys figure that out for yourself. I did a little bit of research, and I wasn't quite able to nail it down myself. I really did try to get the guys to tell me, but they're not allowed to for the reasons, like any other NASs and blendeds and all these things. When they're not allowed to put the distillery on there's a good reason for it. So yeah, don't know what it is, but I think there's just enough information for you to make some sort of assessment on it. But again, we'll get into that when we go into them a little bit more. Now, Canmore. Now's a good opportunity to sort of go about why they're called Canmore. It's just, it's really just a name, but it's Malcolm III, King of Scotland. His nickname was Canmore, which in Scots Gaelic means big head, but it was really big chief, or great chief, or whatever they want to call themselves at the time. So it was a bit of a name that kind of bled into a bit of a dynasty. So there was the kind of Canmore dynasty, whichever, and that bled through history quite a lot. So it's a good name to have. It kind of brings on that kind of Scotch element to it. And today we have 2 single malts, and they are a no age statement and a 12-year-old. Now these are the same distillery. We don't know what it is. It's a Highland distillery. On the marketing materials, it doesn't actually say anywhere on the bottles or anything like that, any of these details, but on the marketing materials you can see things like a distillery that at least these were produced with 100% renewables. I don't know if the whole distillery is, or if just this run managed to do it. And of course we've got a 12-year-old age statement on one of these as well. So that really does limit which ones you can have. If I was chucking names out, you got things like Nicknean, which are really kind of known for their sustainability, but they haven't been around for 12 years, so can't be that, etc. But I'm not going to go into the details of that. You've got the information, you go and check it out. So another thing that are worth noting, and this is where it's really worth doing your research online, or at least coming to someone like me who does it for you so you don't have to. You'd be forgiven for thinking, because these are both 40%, you'd be forgiven for thinking that these are both non-chill filtered, chill filtered and added colour. However, it doesn't say it anywhere on the labels, and that's a bit of a gripe of mine. You know that about me. I think if those things are both true, then you should say them loud and proud on the label, but I guess in this case they may be giving themselves a bit of leeway for changes in the future. But on the internal and the marketing materials that I received with this, it quite clearly states that these are non-chill filtered and no added colour, which is awesome. Again, 40%er. In terms of prices, which I like to say at the start before the tasting and then go into the value afterwards, the no age statement one runs for about 35 quid, although as with all prices there's a plus and minus that applies to that. I've seen this as low as 30, I've seen it as high as 36, depending on where you go. And again, as always, there'll be links in the description below. I'll link to these guys specifically because they've got a new shop that's open, but also Master of Malt hold these ones as well. The 12-year-old runs a little bit higher, as you might expect, somewhere between kind of 45 and a plus or minus 5. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled. You'll see these for deals. You'll see them for that sort of price, roughly. But in the grand scheme of things, I think it tracks. I think it tracks. Yeah, okay. So these are obviously both slightly different. They're both made up of ex-bourbon and ex-sherry. Don't know details about whether they're refill casks or not, but if we're looking at a no age statement, which it could well have older stock in it, but looking at the colours, you know, we're talking fairly fresh casks. They're not going to be new casks, obviously, but you know, maybe a good portion of them is just a fresh refill. You know, so that'd be the third fill or maybe second fill. I don't know. You know, ex-bourbon, ex-sherry, blah blah blah. Point is, not quite sure on that, but because we've got the no added colour, they're good colour. It's good colour, which again we can get into in a little bit. I think it's probably a good time to get into the tasting of these, and we can see which one is your kind of preference and which one you might want to go into. So let's have a look at the first one then. In fact, we'll do a quick comparison. You know, you can see there's a slight difference in colour. This one, the nose statement, obviously being ever so slightly lighter. Let's get onto the nose then and see what we've got. Now, on the nose, I'm getting, actually, oddly, I'm getting quite a lot of apples and pears, orchard fruits, I sometimes say, which to me is usually indicative of a Speyside. You know, that's, again, I always say regional flavour profiles, traditional flavour profiles. Speyside tends to hit that kind of orchard fruits a lot for me, but it isn't the be-all and end-all. You know, you can design your liquid to kind of be whatever, so it confused me to start with because it really does have those apples and pears on there. I'm getting some fudge elements to it as well, which is kind of an element of it leaving it out on the side. If you try and drink it straight from the glass, the bottle, I didn't get that originally, but leaving it out on the side, you're getting some nice fudge elements to it. And there's some really nice kind of light tannic notes at the end of this, so a little bit of wood. Nice, yeah. Let's get onto the palate. Now, as you guys know, I tried to come at this. Obviously, I can't come at it blind, but what I try to do when I'm doing my assessments, I try to think, if I didn't know all this information, what would I think? What would I think? And in this case, I wouldn't have pegged this down at 40%. That's the important part of this. It's got a mouthfeel to it that gives itself, I mean, it's definitely low 40s, so if we're talking, I would be guessing 43 probably, because it's always a good idea to guess in multiples of 3, you know, 43 multiples of 3, you know what I mean. But it's probably, I guess, somewhere between that kind of 40 and 43 area. But we're getting more of that translation from the nose, so the apples and pears. Getting a little bit more of that fudge coming through as well, which is really nice. It gives way a little bit to some kind of light honeyness and some pepperiness coming through. Some spiciness on the back end. Have another quick sip. And then the finish is kind of medium and spicy, I would say. The fruits tend to disappear quite early, and then you're left with a kind of tingly, alcohol-y pepperiness at the back end, which is quite satisfying. I've always enjoyed that kind of finish. And it's very moreish, very much want to go back and have a little bit more. But like I said, the important thing about this is I don't think I would guess this at 40%. Again, low 40s, but it's pretty impressive for what they've actually managed to achieve at that kind of 40% mark. Now, on to the next one, and don't worry about me cleansing my palate because, as you may well know, I'm tasting it on screen, but I have written my tasting notes beforehand, so I'll say cheers, and we'll go on to the nose. Now, this one here, for me, knowing that it's the same distillery is kind of important, because if I didn't know that, if this was blind, I would think this was a completely different liquid. It's got some similarities. It's got those apples and pears for sure, but it's got this extra body to it. It's got a bit more apricot to it, some light tannins as well, but also a little nuttiness to it as well, which is really nice. Yeah, it smells almost entirely different, maybe the same DNA. Interesting thing as well is that I've been racking my brain about trying this distillery before, but it doesn't appear to be in my wheelhouse. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but I can't immediately pin down the distillery based on the tasting notes alone. Is the only fair thing to say. Let's get on to the palate. Now again, it starts out quite light. Those fruits coming through ever so slightly, but this time round, the thing that changes, instead of giving way to honey and that peppery spice, it's giving way to that kind of nuttiness, that extra tannins, a bit more tannins in this one, so it's a little bit more woody than the previous one. More of those orchard fruits are still sticking around, and of course that spice on the back end important. Now the finish is a little bit more full-bodied, so it's medium long instead of just medium, but exactly the same. The fruits kind of peter out a little bit, and you're left with the kind of pleasant spiciness on the back end. So, On to value and kind of conclusions. Now, obviously we have a sort of roughly early £30 and late £40, and I think both of these punch above their prescriptive weights. So if we're talking about the 40%ing, thing like that, you know, that's usually a turn off. I have to say, usually a turn off 40%, because you think to yourself, it's going to be thin, it's going to be this, it's going to be that. But in this case, the way that they've put this together with the non-chill filtered, blah blah blah, is that you've got something that punches above its weight on that 40%. You'd be easily convinced at thinking it was higher. I think that they're both really good value. They're both really good, easy sipping whiskies. As you can see, I mean, I've pretty much chewed through this, and I can't imagine these lasting very long on the shelf indeed, because they're just super easy drinking for a good Friday night session. And because they're 40%, you can get through a good wedge of it with some friends. But for me, I'm really enjoying these. I think that they are indicative of, especially, I'm going to shout out the NAS, because especially that one there, NAS, obviously, we're emerging away, in my opinion, I think we're emerging away from that negativity with NAS. 5 years ago, when NAS really started booming in, when stocks were dwindling for a lot of these famous distilleries, everyone was up in arms about weak liquid. But I think nowadays, producers especially, have cottoned on to producing NAS at good quality, because it hurts your brand to release rubbish whiskey. This is the true fact of it all, especially with people like me in the world. Whiskey tube is rife at the moment, so producers can't get away with putting out bad liquid. So it's refreshing to see a really good quality NAS, alongside a nice 12-year age statement as well for people who are into such things. But for me, oddly enough, my pick versus the cost is the NAS. I think that one there punches well above its price bracket. This one here sits in it quite nicely. It isn't in the wrong side of it at all. But in terms of mouthfeel, punch, experience versus the cost, I think the NAS wins it for me. There you go. Let me know if you've tried any of these Canmores in the comments below. We'll have a little talk about it. Again, check out the description for links and whatnot if you've never heard of these guys before. And they've also got their own YouTube channel at the moment, which is covering independent bottling and things like that. And it really isn't just a sales pitch as well, so that's good. I'll drop a link to that in the description below as well. But yeah, again, let me know what you think about these. I'm going to enjoy my drams of this, and I'll see you again on another video. Cheers.